Welcome to the Elvis Presley channel. Elvis Presley became a worldwide superstar in the 60s and 70s, but the path to the top wasn't easy, and his course was very rocky. He overcame many obstacles to get far beyond the usual heights of fame and fortune, to the point where his body gave out. Elvis left the world with a legacy of music, images, and the immortal legend of a man who never gave up. What was Elvis Presley's biggest obstacle in life? Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the channel. The first obstacle that Elvis faced was there before he was born. Elvis was the only child of a very low-income family that was living through the Great Depression. Not only was there not much money, but the family moved around a lot, chasing seasonal work and the occasional odd jobs they could find. And to make things worse for the young boy, not only was Elvis from a poverty-stricken background, but he was the only surviving child of a set of twins. On January 8, 1935, Gladys Presley gave birth to two boys. Jesse Garon was born first, but was stillborn. Elvis, the second child, survived. The death of one of the children led Gladys to be more attached to her son Elvis than she might otherwise have been, so his relationship with his mother was always very intense. This created yet another obstacle to overcome, being a mama's boy his entire life. His relationship with his mother was sickly sweet, and they even had pet names for each other. Elvis often talked to her in a baby voice, and they communicated in a secret language that no one else was privy to. The bond between Elvis and his mother was far stronger and more sacred than the usual parental bonds that children have with either of their parents. Sometimes the relationship with his mother was so intense that his father, Vernon, was often left out of the family unit. Sometimes he felt more like the son than the father, with Gladys preferring to talk to Elvis than her husband on matters of the household. When Elvis was a small child, Vernon spent some months behind bars for altering a cheque. This time drew Elvis and his mother even closer, bonding over the loss of income and the shame of the incident. Vernon did make full restitution, but the relationship between Elvis and his mother became a pattern set in stone around this time. Elvis placed his mother on a pedestal and worshipped her above everybody else in his life, future wife and girlfriends included. While it's rumoured that Elvis had many girlfriends, he only had one wife. In reality, his heart belonged to his mother long before he met her. Gladys died in the summer of 1958, when Elvis was just 23 years old. He was devastated. He told newspapers that his heart was broken, sobbed hysterically, and nearly collapsed a few times during his mother's funeral. After his mother's death, Elvis was never really the same again. Elvis met Priscilla about a year after his mother died, and from the word go, she knew that she would always take a back seat to Elvis's relationship with his mother, even though she had passed. The obstacle of his relationship with his mother became more apparent when he got married. Elvis had huge problems with his marriage once his wife gave birth to his child, and he felt he could no longer sleep with her, as he held all mothers in such high esteem. Naturally, this situation caused a rift that was never fully resolved. In October 1973, Priscilla and Elvis formally divorced. This took quite a toll on Elvis's mental health. Elvis also had the obstacle of a public lifestyle, the likes of which have never been seen before. His marriage, wife, child, separation and divorce were all photographed and relayed in the press, allowing him no privacy or rest. Elvis was always on show, and everything he did was news. Elvis was worried that he could not possibly live up to the persona that had been built for him by marketing machines and the press, and this also depressed him, as he had been brought up to please people and not let them down. Elvis was distressed by the distance of his only child after the divorce, and opted for quality time with Lisa Marie when he did get to see her. Yet another mental health obstacle he faced in his life that was reported on by the press and played out in the public arena. Another obstacle that Elvis had to overcome was that he was very different to his friends and peers from a very young age. His taste in clothes and music, and how he expressed himself, led people to treat him differently. At school his music teacher told him that he had no aptitude for singing. Still, he loved it so much that he persevered anyway, forming a band with a few fellow music lovers and creating their own style. Elvis took part in a talent show when he was a child, to the surprise of many, as most people didn't realize that this shy boy could even sing, let alone get on a stage. One obstacle that is rarely mentioned is that during his movie career he became bored and disillusioned. He wanted roles more of the type that serious actors like James Dean were getting cast in than the singing, dancing, puppet crooner roles he was cast into. He felt he had more to give in acting roles, but his manager consistently turned down the roles he wanted to try. Elvis's loyalty to his manager and agent, Tom Parker, was not an obstacle as far as Elvis was concerned, but it was considered one by many other people. They felt that Parker's inflexibility was another obstacle for Elvis to negotiate. They felt that Tom made decisions against Elvis's wishes and possibly his best interests, physically and mentally. This was an obstacle that Elvis never rose against and remained in place his whole career. As much of a global sensation as Elvis was, he never travelled overseas. His manager cited many issues that could not be solved, and Elvis's blind loyalty to Parker's decisions meant that he never travelled overseas except when he was stationed in Germany for his military service. He did perform internationally in Canada, but a possible obstacle to even more fame and fortune was that he never travelled to other countries, no matter what the reason. The lifestyle that Elvis was forced to lead because of his stardom created its own set of mental health obstacles that Elvis probably never really sorted out. He developed a range of obsessions and phobias that expressed his inner turmoil and the public outer objectification of him as the king of rock and roll. Celebrities are not immune to low self-esteem, and Elvis's self-perception was warped further by what the press printed and what his innermost circle tried to hide from him. He was a very emotionally conflicted and complex man. This isolated lifestyle wasn't as much of a problem for Elvis as he was a bit of a germaphobe. He didn't like going to other people's houses and eating from their silverware, as he couldn't be sure how clean it was. Elvis also developed the habit of drinking from the handle side of a mug that wasn't his own, as he would be surer that people hadn't handled that part of the cup. His phobia of germs also helped keep him isolated from other people, one more obstacle for Elvis to deal with. The pressure to perform, often and consistently, also took its toll on him, along with the complete lack of privacy. The anxiety which he developed as a child was exacerbated by constantly being in the spotlight. He had no personal freedom, and ended up confined to either his mansion or the stage. It's also very hard to ask for help when the people around you have put you on a pedestal of perfection. If all this wasn't enough, Elvis also had several medical conditions from childhood to overcome. He had chronic insomnia, sleepwalking and anxiety, as well as asthma and allergies. Many of these are likely to have run in the family, and there is evidence that his parents and grandparents, who were first cousins, had similar medical issues. Many members of Elvis's extended family had died much younger than expected. These medical conditions were just another thing that Elvis had to overcome in his lifetime. He started with prescription medication to help alleviate the pain, sleeplessness and anxiety. Then his lifestyle started to exacerbate his other latent conditions. As his glaucoma affected his eyesight and his colon swelled to twice its standard size, Elvis increased his prescription medication to astronomical proportions. The pain in his bones and joints led him to taking painkillers and a cornucopia of other drugs to manage the new symptoms the old ones created. Although he barely smoked and almost never drank in his later years, hypertension, liver damage and emphysema added to the plethora of medications and even more medical problems. Elvis believed in honouring his contractual obligations and continued to take whatever he needed to so that the show could go on. Elvis felt he couldn't stop, as so many people needed him for everything. He once said, "I'm sick, I don't feel good, but I can't stop because everybody is relying on me." His generosity was also a bit of an obstacle for him. If he went to buy a new car, and he loved buying new cars, he would often buy one for the friend that came with him, and also for the people who happened to be in the car lot at the same time. His generosity caused Elvis to attract many friends and relatives around him that were probably taking advantage of his giving nature to their own advantage. This made it hard for Elvis to determine which people were really his friends, and so he kept his inner circle small and tight, not always the best strategy for dealing with mental health issues. Elvis's choice of songs in his last years can attest to his declining mental health in later years. His last studio recordings were songs like She Thinks I Still Care, He'll Have to Go, and Moody Blues. He has a penchant for bitter endings and hopelessness in relationships for his songs towards the end of his life. These songs were not great musical strides forward, but a reflection of a seriously depressed mind. His life in the public eye was another obstacle for him. If he went out, he was mobbed, and if he stayed home, he was barricaded in by the mobs of fans surrounding his mansion. Elvis couldn't go to the shops and do normal things, so he became a recluse and indulged in a very unconventional lifestyle, which ultimately led to his adoption of some very destructive habits. His declining physical and mental health was the obstacle he never overcame, even though in his last years of performing his corpulence and altered mental state were obvious. His voice was perfect when he sang. He hit all the notes right up to the last song of his life, just hours before he died, giving his fans and family his very best every time. It's more likely that Elvis died of these inherited medical conditions that were exacerbated by drug abuse and an atrocious diet in his later years. Many of his fellow stars, celebrities and friends, including his inner circle, the Memphis Mafia, were all taking the same sort of drugs and medications. Those that hadn't died of accidents were all still healthy 30 years later. It was unlikely that Elvis would live to old age, the biggest obstacle he couldn't do much about. Both Elvis and his mother had a similar 4-year period of declining health, with his mother dying at just 46 years old and Elvis at 42. Both patients accessed different drugs and medical care and still died young, which makes the conditions Elvis suffered from more likely to be inherited than lifestyle-related or self-inflicted. Elvis faced many obstacles in his life. Some made him who he was and helped create an entertainer, the likes of which hadn't been seen before. Other obstacles hindered him from thoroughly enjoying all the blessings that came with his incredible talents. Elvis did, however, use those gifts that he was born with to the fullest extent possible. Elvis left us a legacy of a man that never gave up and lived the way he wanted to, right to the end. At this level, it is difficult to decide whether celebrity is a good or bad thing. It was hard for Elvis's family members to cope with. Why Elvis Presley's fame was a curse for his mother? Find out from this video.